Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button, and I'm a granite sculptor. I thought I'd put out my clay tools, as long as we're doing tool videos, or show you different things and talk a little bit about tools that work for me, that I use a lot, that I don't use, and how I got here. My granite apprenticeship under my sculptor was about stone. He didn't train me to do clay. I got some of that from, learned about it with Angelo, learned about it with Giuliano. And they guided me. Giuliano gave me my first lessons in clay, actually. So I didn't have a lot of tools. I'd carved a few, made a few tools out of wood up in Vermont. But Vermont is not it's not a place where you're going to go to a big art supply place and they're going to have a wide variety of tools to choose from. So I did go down to the art store nearby and pick out the stiffest palette knives that I could find, thinking they may be an equitable substitute. That really wasn't the case. I used them a little bit, but they just couldn't do it. So I worked with some of my tools that I'd carved by hand, and then when we got down here and built a studio, I started doing more clay, and because I started doing clay for everything I cut, just for practice for me, and so I started making tools. Now, the money I talk about making tools, having something to do some to cut with, like a bandsaw or a little jigsaw or a scroll saw or something like that, to do small pieces like this. You can buy them cheap. If you look around, you can buy a little scroll saw for $30. Sometimes you can buy small bandsaws that kind of money, and by using some wood that was salvaged. These are all pieces of axe handle. And something like an axe handle is typically made out of hickory or ash. It's made out of a really strong wood that's got some elasticity to it. And so it's very easy to just cut off. This is literally just sawed off the handle. I didn't do anything except flatten it. There was already the shape, and I use this tool so much. The same thing with this one. I use this tool a lot. And you can take a broken handle. If I have a tool that breaks, that has a handle that fails on it, it goes over in a bucket in the corner. And then I saw it up and make tools out of it. And it works really well, and it's cheap. I'm making the most of what I've got. Even if I have to go out and buy a handle at, say, a flea market or something like that, that's a hickory handle that maybe isn't perfect, you can buy it for cheap. You can get a whole box full of tools out of one axe handle. So I ended up making a lot of tools like that for we do events and shows, and we'll take clay and set it out and let people work with it and have lots of tools for them to pick from, so that they can relax and have fun. Now, I did learn about wedging clay to do a background or a ground on a board, and you'll take your clay and press it on, and you use this to press the clay on instead of using your thumb, because your thumb is going to hate you at the end of the day if you spend hours trying to wedge a big background or to resolve a big background. If I'm doing any background, if I'm doing a big 4-foot niche or anything, everything gets wedged on with this to get it established and marry it well to the board. And then I can take and screed it off, whether I use this wooden one that's nice and long or just a metal ruler that's really strong. Doesn't have to be accurate, just to scrape it smooth. And you scrape it off, and then you fill in the holes, and you scrape it off, you fill in the holes until you've got a perfect ground. And that's how I was trained to do it. So I use this to wedge it on. I had opportunity at one point where I was up in Cincinnati at one of the nicer art stores, and I was able to buy some store-bought clay modeling tools that I could actually lay my hands on, see them in person. And they weren't cheap. I think they were around $30 each. I forget, 150, 170 for these I don't know, 5 or 6 tools that I bought, and they're nice, but I really didn't find that I used them that much. The shapes didn't work for me. And that's the challenge with buying tools if you're not familiar with what you like and what you work with. Now, these are Italian, these are nice tools, there's nothing wrong with them. It's just these shapes didn't work for me. So I have, we had a big dairy farm. That's how we got to South Carolina in the first place. We had some old livestock panels with 1/4-inch wire left over from the farm that, we bought 40 years ago. And so I cut it up with some bolt cutters and twisted the little spot welds off. And I've got an acetylene torch. Now, oxyacetylene torch is one of the most valuable tools I've got, piece of equipment in terms of making tools, because I rebuild chisels with it. I can make tools, I can weld, I can do a lot of stuff. And so this becomes a tool like this. You can heat it up and shape the end however you want, just with a hammer over a piece of metal or the back of your vise or something like that if you're careful. And I knew exactly the shapes I like, and so I made them and I use them all the time. So you can buy a whole hog panel, livestock panel, and it might cost $40, and you'll have more tool material than you're ever going to use. So just a little bit of it goes a long way. And a damaged one won't bring full price. You can buy a bent up, wrecked one, and you're still golden. So I made all of these tools, this whole crowd of them, and this is what I typically use. Now, I didn't make that one, but a couple of these I made out of old long Allen wrenches, but we only had a few of those I wasn't using. There was a big can full of them, and there were only a few that were long. But these metal tools fit what I do. I've learned what I like and what works for me, and so I made them, and I don't even get the other tools out. I use these metal tools. This is an old saw blade. It's an old pole saw, and there were several pieces, and I just decided I'd make some shapes and cut them out. And the teeth were down the side, ground the teeth off, again on the belt sander, and they make a really great tool. And you can buy scrapers or you can make them. So I just decided to make them. Then I've read for years about Boxwood, because Boxwood is a premium for a tool, and there's a boxwood hedge next door at my parents' house. So I thought, well, why don't I give it a shot? And so I trimmed the hedges back, and I had a pile of all these big sticks that I just throw out and let them season. They'd set for about a year. And then I started cleaning them up on the belt sander, and they make the most exquisite wooden tools. It's out of this world. I love them. And so for having that belt sander, a power sander of some type, whether it's an oscillating sander, whether it's a disc sander, whether it's a belt sander, and you can do it by hand completely. You don't have to use power tools if you don't want to. But if you've got some boxwood hedges nearby, or you can get a landscaper when they tear out some bushes to give you one, for free, because they got to get rid of it. You can have all the wooden tools you want, and you can modify them and shape them the way you want. Spend the money on the machine instead of the tools, and make the tools. And it's very satisfying to me to make tools. Now, something about this tool that's a benefit. Even this one, you can see that it's not perfectly straight. The benefit there is that it's not going to roll off your stand. It'll probably catch, and if it's got a little more curve to it, it may be that it fits your tool, your hand really well, but the point is to have it have some shape, and then it's not going to go anywhere when you set it down. Because tools rolling off on the floor, it isn't necessarily about the inconvenience. When they hit the floor, it'll damage the tool and you'll have to reshape it, and that's not cool. Now, along the way, we bought out a bunch of studios and tools. I mentioned that before. I did make a wedging tool out of Boxwood with a bigger end on it, and I like that a lot. But these are all broom handles, and so they're real easy, and you'll find that the size of that end really is a personal thing. This is a great size, and this one I made it just almost the same exact size. This size is too small for me. I don't go fast enough. But if you're not real strong, you might like the smaller thing because it goes a little slower, but you'll get better work. So, but along the way, I've been able to buy some serious, real sculpture house, real knives, real clay tools, plaster tools, and they're gorgeous. They're Italian. They're everything they need to be. But I use these because they made them in these shapes work for me. These shapes may work for you well, or you can take and tune them up and reshape them the way you want. And but these are pretty expensive. These aren't cheap, and I never went out and just bought a whole big pile of these because I learned in the beginning that I probably wouldn't use them. Now, an alternative to buying these tools that I've already mentioned in other videos and paying top dollar is to take some old Rifflers that are worn out, like the old sculptors used to do, and dress these teeth off. Either scrub them off on a stone and smooth them all off by hand, or put them on a grinder or belt sander and take them all off, smooth it up, polish it up a little bit, and make it the texture shape you want, and you've got clay tools. That's what the old guys used to do. And if I'd had a bunch of extra Rifflers laying around when I started, that's what I would have done. These are a cheap set that you can go to, a discount tool store, little cheap made in China Rifflers that are stitched very poorly. They don't cut well to use them on stone. But if you take and dress them off, they make fantastic clay tools. And so if you don't have the ability to, have a torch and heat stuff up and do this like I've done, this is a very quick alternative because you can spend, $10 for a cheap set of Rifflers, and they can be the cheapest set you can get. It doesn't make any difference. You just want enough material that you can smooth them up. Even if they're not perfectly smooth, they don't have to be a mirror polish. Get them smoothed off as much as possible so that you still got some tool left, and then shape them the way you want, and you got clay tools. So that's very traditional in terms of what the old sculptors used to do, and that's just the way they did it. And no one does that anymore because they can go buy store-bought ones. But you can buy this whole kit of 10 of them, 8 of them, 7, whatever they are. There's a whole bunch. They have different numbers in the different sets. Buy that whole bunch of them for less than you're going to pay for one of these fancy tools. And you're going to have a whole set to get started. Find out what you like, and then when you know what you like, if you're going to spend money, you can spend money and get the good tools. So, I didn't mention you need I use a good putty knife. I like something that's got good firmness to it. I've got you can use, there's different ones here that may be nice and strong. Like this one's is pretty flexible, but it's pretty firm. This one is very flexible, and I don't like it as much. It's not as predictable, so I don't use this much, but I thought I'd try it. I don't like it. I've got an old forged ink knife it's awesome, but it was a deal at a yard sale, and they're too expensive for me to just buy. But that's a great tool. It's well worth the money. So, but some homemade tools out of 1/4-inch panel wire, some homemade tools out of boxwood that came out of the hedge next door and laid on the ground for a year while it cured and seasoned and everything, and some tools made out of old broom handles and axe handles, and then these scrapers made out of an old saw blade. This is what I really use, and if you have the ability to make your tools, you can make whatever you want, try it, and then remake them, reshape them, throw them away, and just keep going. So that's about it. My name's Clint Button here at Carolina Sculpture Studio. Thanks for coming in.